Alright, so today we're going to be checking out the Fine Art and Photography Photo Kit from Red River. So last time we checked out the base kit, and today we're going to check out the Fine Art kit and see how it stacks up. The thing in here that I'm actually the most excited to try out is the Palette Bureau rag paper, which promises to be 100% cotton, and I've never actually printed anything on rag paper before, so I'm really curious to kind of try it out and see how it makes the photos look. I already downloaded the ICC profiles and did all the calibration in preparation for the last video, but you know, if you're coming into this fresh, definitely, you know, reminder that that's something that you need to do.
Alright, so here's what comes in the box. These are all the papers in the kit, and I'm going to open this up and get started. So I'm going to start off with the Aurora Art Natural paper and just kind of go down the list in order, and we're going to take a look at all of the prints and see how much we like them. From the description, Aurora is the rare combination of museum quality material and true value. So basically, I get the sense that this is their cheaper version of their kind of nice fine art paper. On their website, the two big things that they call out are this is paper that's a little bit on the heavy side, and it's also paper that can be displayed for a very long time. So picking it up, I definitely can confirm that it is a little bit heavy paper, but obviously I cannot confirm how long the paper is going to last. Alright, so first impressions. So it looks like a lot of the other matte papers that I've used in the past, which is not super saturated, not super punchy. It's almost like you knew this was going to happen, just feeling the front of the paper, because it's got a little bit more of like a rougher feel, and it's not like glossy in any sense. Looking at the construction photo specifically, I can tell that the paper is resolving a lot of detail, but it definitely doesn't look vibrant and punchy in any sense. Next up, we're going to put the photo under a bright light so that you can see how it handles reflections. In my opinion, this print does very well, and I notice almost no glare whatsoever in the image. So you can see how good that paper was doing. We're going to compare this to a similar print taken on one of the metallic papers, placed in the exact same position where the glare is really apparent. I don't know if you'll be able to see this super well, but one more thing that I wanted to try to show you is how this paper looks like under a microscope. And we're also going to show you a view of the paper from the side. Alright, next up we've got the Aurora Art White. As far as I can tell, it's pretty similar to the Aurora Art Natural. I guess the backing of the paper is like a little bit brighter, but as far as I can tell, I mean, they look pretty similar to me. Next up, we've got the paper under a bright light, so directly under my lamp so that you can see how it reflects off of the surface. So it looks like there's pretty much no reflection from this paper that I can really see. Next up, we've got the Blanco Matte Canvas, which is part cotton and part polyester. You can see actually just from looking at the surface of the paper that the surface of the paper looks really different than normal photo paper. Like it's got this really kind of deep texture to it. I guess trying to emulate canvas. So I guess it kind of has a texture similar to canvas. This one's kind of weird actually because they only gave me one sheet and they didn't label it in the bottom right corner like they did for all the other sheets. So I'm not 100% sure that I'm using this exactly the right way, but we're going to send it through the printer and see what happens. Alright, so straight away, I mean, this paper looks really different. Like it looks almost the most different out of a lot of the papers that we tried. And one of the big reasons why it looks so different is you can really see the texture of the paper when you're looking at the print. So if you've ever seen, you know, canvas, like it has this kind of, I guess, like woven together texture, and you can see that texture not just in like the white areas, but you can also see it. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but you can actually see the texture like on the main part of the image if you look at it really close. It's still got a little bit of that matte paper washed out look, but there's something about using canvas and printing something on something that looks like canvas that's just really fun. Like it's got this fun, at least to me, it's got this really fun kind of artistry feel to it that I really, really like. Alright, so once again we've got the microscope view. I don't know if you'll be able to see it super well, but something that I really notice, which I think is really interesting, is the colors on this image look like they blend together a little bit more actually than the colors on some of the other images. So like if you look under one of these microscopes, usually you can see, you know, all of the individual dots that came from the printer, or at least a lot of the individual dots that came from the printer. But on this one, I mean, you can still see some of the dots, but if you zoom in really, really close, they look a little bit more kind of smoothed out than they did on some of the other prints, which is something that I think is really interesting. We're also going to put this directly under the lamp so that you can see how it reflects light. And as you can see, it handles light reflections pretty well. Next up, we've got the Palo Duro Smooth Rag, which when picking it up feels really similar to the Aurora art paper, but we're going to run some photos through the printer and see how it turns out. So this is the Palo Duro Smooth Rag print. Straight away, I don't see too much of a difference between the Palo Duro and the Aurora art. They both look pretty similar to me. Once again, it does a pretty solid job of handling light reflections. I don't see any like weird reflections or artifacts when I'm looking at this paper. I'm not going to show it, but I also took a quick look under the microscope and I didn't notice anything too different from the Aurora art paper. So these are the Palo Duro burrito prints. From what I can tell, these are pretty similar to the original Palo Duro prints, but with more of kind of like a semi-gloss added to them. It almost reminds me a little bit of the Pro Luster and the Pro Satin prints from the original base sample kit, but with a little bit more kind of texture to them on the surface. Similar to those prints, I actually really like the way that this one renders the construction photo. It looks really kind of sharp and punchy. As you can already see straight away with the photos being placed directly under my lamp, this does not do as good of a job at reflecting light as some of the matte prints. So it's a little bit diffuse, as you can see over here, but you know, it's a semi-gloss paper, so you know, what did you expect? I really like the look of these photos, but I think that has to do a little bit with the fact that just in general, I think I like the look of the semi-gloss prints a little bit more than the matte. Alright, so next up we've got the Palo Duro etching paper. This is supposed to be their award-winning paper, so we're going to put it to the test and see if it really has award-winning image quality. It is a little bit of a heavier paper, and it's got that kind of texture feel to it, so it has that kind of artist sketchbook kind of quality. Alright, so initial impressions, I mean it's good, but I'm not like crazy impressed with it. You can actually see the texture of the paper in some of the lighter areas of the image, especially in the construction paper, like, sorry, especially in the construction photo. I mean, you can see the texture of the paper in the sky of the photo, and it actually gives it, I think, a really cool effect to it. I also took a quick look under the microscope in which you can see the pattern of dots on the paper pretty clearly, but it actually blends in with the rougher texture of the paper a little bit. So like, you can see the dots on the paper, but also the texture of the paper itself is kind of like rough and kind of bumpy. And so having the bumps of the paper plus the bumps of the dots kind of makes things feel like they're smoothed out a little. Last up, we've got the Palo Duro soft gloss rag paper. So by this point, you probably know that I have a little bit of a preference for gloss paper over matte paper. So there's a good chance that I'm going to like this one a little bit more, but let's take a shot at it and see how it goes. It's supposed to give you a kind of classic look, which is something that I really like. So hopefully this will be the paper for me. So we do have prints, and I do really like them. One of the things I really like, actually, looking at the grassy photo, is the blacks in this print look really dark, and that gives the image overall kind of like a lot more contrast and a lot more punch to it. The greens in this photo also look like super, super saturated, almost to the point of making the whole image almost look like it's got a slightly greenish tint to it. Like all glossy prints, this one does reflect a little bit of light, but the way that it reflects bright lights is actually pretty diffuse. And so, I mean, you do see it a little bit, but it's not super noticeable or super ugly looking. So I'm actually pretty happy with the way that this reflects light for a soft gloss print. Another thing that I just kind of wanted to briefly call attention to is like the feel of the paper itself. So it's not quite as heavy as the etching paper, but it still feels pretty substantial. and it's got that kind of sticky front to it, kind of like classic photo paper that you might be used to. We're going to take a quick look under the microscope, and it's the same story as the etching paper here. So you can still see the pattern of dots on the paper. It doesn't blend super well, but the paper itself has a little bit of texture. Not quite as much as the etching paper, but it has enough texture that it kind of blends the pattern of dots a little bit. You can still see the pattern of dots, but the paper itself is also bumpy, so the dotted pattern looks kind of like the bumps in the paper. Another thing that I want to call out here that I think is really interesting is the way that this reflects light really shows off the texture pattern in the paper. So when it's directly under a bright light, the bumps in the paper catch the light a little bit more, and you can really see the texture of the paper itself a lot more emphasized.
All right, so wrapping up. So compared to the base kit, I thought the photos from this kit were a little bit more fun and a little bit more interesting. Like, they had a lot more texture, and they had the canvas print in there, and they were just like a little bit more kind of like artsy and a little bit more creative as compared to just like standard photo prints. Even though they were a little bit more fun though, I really wouldn't get most of the photo papers in the sample pack. I know that I'm personally not super partial to like the matte print look, but definitely some of the papers like the Palo Duro etching, which I was really excited about, kind of had a little bit more muted colors and looked a little bit more flat than I like my images to look when I print them out. That being said, there were a couple of standout papers that I actually did really like from this kit. So the first one that I really liked was the canvas print. I just think it's super cool to print on canvas. It still had a little bit of that muted look, but I think that like printing something on canvas and showing it to someone or like delivering it to someone really adds like an extra kind of like punch and an extra kind of excitement to like delivering an image. And I thought that it printed pretty good. Like, it wasn't like perfect, but I liked it and I liked the creative aspect of it. The other print that I actually really liked is I really liked the Palo Duro soft gloss print. Almost so much so that I would even consider using it over the Pro Platinum print. Like, to me, it looks really punchy, and the colors, especially the darks, look really good. And I think that's what's giving the image so much contrast. And I also, especially compared to the Pro Platinum, really like the way that it reflects direct light. So like the Pro Platinum like has a little bit more reflection, whereas this is like a little bit more diffuse and a little bit more balanced. And then I also do like the texture of it. Like, I feel like it's subtle. Like, it's not a crazy amount of texture, but I feel like it adds just like a little bit more character to especially the construction photo than some of the other papers that I've used. Please leave a comment telling me what you thought, what you'd like to see. I really could use any and all feedback that I can get. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video.